Hey there! Do you know what a fabric sandwich is? Well, if you do, then you know how a quilt is constructed. Welcome to Seeing Beauty with Sandy. Today, we're going to look at the beauty of vintage quilts. So if you know how a quilt is constructed, you know that it's basically 2 layers of fabric with a layer of batting in the middle, which used to be cotton, probably is polyester today, but it's kind of like a sandwich. And it's made that way for insulation and for warmth. We all know that layers make us warmer. So how did quilts get started? Well, I think they started from necessity to keep people warm. You know, older houses may just only have a fireplace or two for warmth, and at night when the fire died down, it could be pretty chilly in those houses. So these were very, very important to a family. And you know what? They're important to us today. They're just part of our lives. Think of all the things we do with quilts. We might take one to the beach and put it down for sunbathing. We might take it to a park, put it down on the ground for a picnic, put it on the floor for a baby to play on. When we move, we wrap our furniture in it to protect it. And you know what? We might even put them on the bed and use them for warmth or decorate a whole bedroom around them. So we kind of take them for granted and how they are a part of our lives. Now, when women started to make quilts for necessity, I think they just couldn't help themselves. They just couldn't keep themselves from making them beautiful. And you know, a lot of quilts are made from fabric scraps because it wasn't really economical to go out and buy a lot of yardage, cut it up in little pieces and sew it back together again, although we do that now. But scraps were more economical, and if you've ever been a sewer, you know all about scrap bags, that you always kept scraps in case there was a use for them. But as people made quilts, I think, more and more beautiful, people designed patterns, they passed them around. Maybe one person added to the pattern, changed it a little bit. People named them, people changed the name. People are still making beautiful quilt patterns. So they really have become an art, and quilt makers are making such gorgeous things now. They are truly art. And if you've ever thought about quilting, you think, oh, that would be a monumental task. I couldn't start that. I couldn't do that. Well, maybe you could take a class, maybe at a local quilt shop, and you could learn to make a small project, maybe a pillow, maybe placemats, maybe a table runner. But there's a real joy in taking beautiful fabric and putting it together in a design, quilting it, and then being able to use it. Now, when I say quilting it, I'm talking about the quilting stitches. Now, those are the stitches that hold the top fabric and the bottom fabric together. Those stitches go through the batting in the middle in our fabric sandwich, and they keep the batting from shifting around when the quilt is moved around. If it's hung up, you wouldn't want all the batting just to sink to the bottom. So not only do they serve a function, they also serve for beauty. I'm sure you have seen beautiful quilts that just look embossed with these beautiful designs with all these little stitches. And you know, back in the day, they also served for a community, because women would gather at each other's homes for a quilting bee, and they'd have a frame to put the quilt on, and they'd sit around and they would do all those tiny stitches, and they would visit while they did it. My mother told me that the ladies came to their house once a week to quilt. My aunt told me she liked to hang around so she could hear all the gossip. But my mother also told me one day when her mother wasn't feeling well, but the other ladies were there at her house to quilt, she kind of got underfoot and got in the way. So one of the ladies took her aside gave her a needle and thread and showed her how to stitch the briar stitch. And you know what? That started her love of sewing, and she was only 4 years old. So today I've got some vintage quilts to show to you, and I hope you'll just enjoy looking at them. And if you haven't before known anything about how quilts are made, that you'll look at them and really appreciate even more all the stitching. So I'm going to scoop down here to the end, and we're going to start with this vintage quilt. I do not know the name of this pattern, but it's just so pretty. The center is like a 9 patch, which means there's 9 squares, but there's a curve on each side of the square, and then this rounded piece that holds all the squares together. It's very, very pretty, and you can see from the shadows and see the quilting stitches. And this is just made in pastel colors, and I love it. This one was loaned to me by my friend Teresa so we could make this video. I don't know the name of this pattern, but I'm pretty sure it has something to do with tulips. So isn't this pretty? So bright and colorful, and just a symmetrical foursome of tulips. Any way you turn this square around, it's going to look the same. And you can again see the quilting stitches. They kind of emboss and outline the flowers and the designs, and then there's a design in the background as well. Now I'm going to scoot all the way back down to this end, and this is one of mine that's a favorite. I don't know the name of this pattern. A girl with a full skirt and a dress in a garden with a sun parasol and flowers. I call them cottage girls. And this is just so sweet. And every square is different. Every girl has different fabric and different colors. But you can see there's 3 pieces of fabric in the skirt, and then a piece of fabric for the top, and then the parasol and the sunbonnet, and then all the other details are embroidered. Just so charming. The flowers are embroidered, her feet, her hands, the handle on her parasol, and the details on her parasol. And then this one, I have heard this pattern called Grandma's Flower Garden. It may have some other names, traditional names, but I don't know that. But I can't imagine how many little pieces of fabric there are in this quilt. I'm just going to take a guess and say there's a jillion. And these little pieces, I measured them, and they're about 5/8 of an inch after they're sewn together. These are little, let me count the sides, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hexagons. I'll make sure they weren't octagons. Little hexagons, and this whole piece, this whole quilt is little hexagons. The background material is not a solid piece. It's all sewn together in little pieces. And then these flowers are too. And then it is also quilted. There are quilting stitches. You can see them. Well, I can see them here, but you can see them here around the center of the flower. It's just a beautiful embossing. And then there's a little stitch border on the end and a pretty floral pattern on the back. Now this one, I'm just really excited to share with you. I think is kind of really, really interesting. This one was made, I believe, 1897. So it's at least 120 years old. And this is a crazy quilt. And I guess they were named this because you just start cutting and stitching and just do whatever comes into your head. And they are made of pieces. I'm trying to figure out, this is very delicate, as you can imagine. I want to show it to you this way. The pieces are irregular. They're just cut willy-nilly. however somebody wanted to, whatever size scraps they had, because crazy quilts are known to have silk and velvet and really nice fabrics in them. In fact, this one had several pieces of silk, because the silk ones are kind of disappearing on me after over 100 years. But as you can see, it's like somebody said, I'm going to use every embroidery stitch I know on this quilt. And so they outlined all the pieces in embroidery, and then they would just embroider things on the quilt itself. This one, I can't unfold the whole thing, but it has an elephant on it. It has a man feeding a cow embroidered on it. And my favorite, it has a teacup embroidered on it. Look at this, you could just see a chain of circles. Just very imaginative. Just such a wonderful thing. And I just think whoever put this together had a wonderful time doing it. So I hope you've enjoyed looking at a few vintage quilts. There's just nothing like them. They are treasures. They were made with a heart. They were made with an eye for beauty. And I encourage you to look all around you for the beauty that's around you. It's there, you know. We just need to stop a minute and really enjoy it. So I invite you to subscribe to Seeing Beauty with Sandy on YouTube and see what I'm up to from time to time. And then join me on Instagram at Sandy_Lynam_Cloud. See you next time.